The whole trend in China has been to make the state supreme again and to subdue private enterprise and put it under the party's authority. That is accompanied by a state strategy of going out into other economies and doing exactly what they will in order to advance China's interests. And remember, these are trained communist, revolutionary Marxists. It's not a joke. You need to take them seriously.
Now, Prime Minister Keir Starmer should forget about trying to reopen negotiations with the US and build an economic coalition of the willing, writes economics editor David Smith in today's Sunday Times. A coalition which could include China as one of the worst hit by the US tariffs and a major world economy, of course. Now, Starmer will announce tomorrow that the government must move further and faster to boost growth, including easing regulations on electric car manufacturers. And Chancellor Rachel Reeves will hold talks with India on Wednesday to try and speed up a new trade deal. So, should China be on that list as well? Is it time for the UK to think about establishing a closer economic and business relationship with China? That is our debate question today. I'd love to get your thoughts on it. 0333 003 2353. Join in the conversation. And here to discuss this with me are Peter Burnett, CEO of China Britain Business Council, the CBBC. Peter, welcome to the show.
Thank you very much. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon. And in the studio with me is Michael Sheridan, former Far East correspondent for the Sunday Times and author, of course, of The Red Emperor, Xi Jinping and His New China. Michael, thanks for coming in.
Thank you very much.
Right, let's kick off. Peter, your case for the UK having closer economic ties with China.
Well, I mean, it's a very simple one. China is the second largest economy in the world. And if we are being, for whatever reason, squeezed out of the first largest economy in the world, then the second largest economy in the world is probably where we need to turn. And alongside that, of course, is, you know, a real welcome, I think, that is being shown by the Chinese leadership towards more engagement, more economic engagement, both exports into China and investment into the United Kingdom. I've literally just come back from China. I was there for 3 weeks. I was attending something called the China Development Forum, which I perfectly accept is a business forum set up for international businesses. So to some extent, you know, they're playing to the gallery and the messages that they send. But the overwhelming message was, you know, come, you will be very welcome. We are further opening and reforming our economy. They have something, or they had something called a negative list, which was a list of segments and sectors in the economy that could not be invested in. That was, you know, in the hundreds only a couple of years ago, and it's all the way down to, I think, 27 now. And they tend to be in you know, national security sensitive industries. But there's a warm welcome out there.
Okay. So China,
you know, our members are responding.
China's open for business. Michael, what would the fears be for Britain getting closer to China? What would your concerns be?
Of course we should trade with China, and we should welcome Chinese investment, to invest in China, particularly welcome Chinese students and people to our universities and other places of learning. And it's hard to see the downside on one front. On the other hand, trade with China comes at a cost. Mm-hmm. And I think the government's got it, broadly speaking, right at the moment, in that they are keeping calm, carrying on, not reciprocating on the Trump tariffs, and also balancing their ties with China. But they have to strike a balance, which is between being an open economy, as we are, broadly speaking, but also being an ally and friend of the United States. And let's not forget that all those goods that go between Britain and China on the sea lanes do so under the guard and watch of the United States Navy and Air Force. They keep the sea lanes open. So you can't separate the two. I think the other thing in the Sunday Times today is very interesting, is that Keir Starmer is also going to say that this is the end of globalization as we knew it. Mm. And that echoes the words of the head of HSBC only the other week. China was the big winner from globalization, and now it's confronting a very different reality. So it's an uncertain time, not a time to be rushing into the Chinese arms.
Peter, what do you make of Michael's response there? That there has always been doing trade with China is one thing, but you can't have trade without the political engagement with China. And that's where things become a little bit more tricky, because business and politics in China are almost one and the same.
Yes, I mean, you have to go into China with your eyes wide open, no doubt about that. And by the way, CBBC will help you do that, and we'll guide you through some of the policy issues, and we'll make you aware of how to engage in the China economy. But the same is also true in the United Kingdom. I've had conversations with Chinese investors who have asked me questions about how the House of Lords works, because they don't understand it. They say you're a democracy, and yet you've got all these people in the House of Lords who are voting on legislation. So every country has its quirkiness, I suppose. Some would argue that in China it's more than just quirkiness, and you've got to be aware of national security issues. And for us, by the way, national security is a red line. We're never going to cross national security. But what I would say is that this is an economy that is expanding, where there is, by some reckoning, 800 million now middle-income consumers. Mm-hmm. Who want to buy, who want to travel, who want to use the services, and want to buy the products that are produced in the United Kingdom.
Okay, just a question for you, Peter. I've had 3 messages come in whilst we've been on air, from Paul, Brian, and from James. I'm not going to read all 3 of them, because essentially they're all saying the same thing, which is caution. One thing that is the same in all 3 messages is intellectual property. Businesses who've suffered when they've done business in China for intellectual property theft. What is your view on that? What experiences have you had?
My view on that is it's a slightly unreconstructed view of China, to be honest.
Are you denying that it happens?
And I am denying that it is happening now, because I think that China's technology is so advanced that actually, one of the consequences of the closing down of access to, for example, chips, semiconductors in the United States, is that China has advanced that capability in a way that one would never have expected.
So you're saying that they're advanced enough not to need to rely to intellectual property theft. But Michael, there was an incredulous face that you just made in the studio. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, look, let's be clear. China does have a different system. It is a Marxist-Leninist dictatorship run by a single party. You need to study the words and the works of Xi Jinping himself to get the message, which is that the party commands north, south, east and west. The whole trend in China has been to make the state supreme again and to subdue private enterprise and put it under the party's authority. That is accompanied by a state strategy of going out into other economies and doing exactly what they will in order to advance China's interests. And remember, these are trained communist, revolutionary Marxists. It's not a joke. You need to take them seriously. And one of the things that the party teaches you is not to have any scruples. The means serve the ends. And intellectual property and bad treatment of foreign businesses and discriminatory rules all fit into that practice. And I'm not saying Western economies are open and perfect either, but the political risk in China is much higher than in other markets. And frankly, the business community needs to grasp that, because the British government is not going to ride to the rescue of you when you get into real trouble, believe me.
Peter?
I think political risk in economies all around the world has risen very substantially over the last week, frankly. And, if you want an example of maverick policy making, you don't need to look very much further than over the Atlantic either. Everybody...
Are you comparing doing business in China with doing business in the US?
No, of course not.
Okay.
No, of course not. That's an absurd position to have. What I'm saying is that policy making, executive orders, policy making via executive orders is an unusual way
I see.
of producing policy.
Right.
But that seems to be the way that that certainly the United States in the last couple of weeks has gone, and so political risk has definitely risen there as well. Now, I'm not making the argument in favor of engaging in China without your eyes open. Of course, there's political risk. There has been for a very long time. But business will do what business does best, which is to work out what the products and services are that it can provide, engage with the customers and sell them at a fair and reasonable price.
Okay. Michael, you wanted to come in?
Well, let me support Peter in one comparison, which is that the policy making in Washington certainly speaks for itself over the last week. And what we've seen from China demonstrates my point. They have delivered a highly disciplined, well-organized, detailed and thought-out set of responses to the Trump tariffs. Not only have they levied a reciprocal tariff, they have targeted United States firms for measures. They have chosen sectors to inflict pain on their competitors and rivals. Most of all, they have now put export controls on very sensitive rare earth materials, some of which China is the only supplier for, virtually the monopoly supplier. And these are rare earths that are vital to new technology, artificial intelligence, and the Pentagon's weapon systems. So the Chinese are extremely well organized, they are dedicated, and they see this for what it is, which is a broad spectrum competition verging on conflict, and we need to be aware of that.
So, gentlemen, just bringing this to a close, just to get your final thoughts. Peter, going forward, we're not quite clear where the UK government is going to land. We know that we're going to be hearing some announcements this week about possible trade deals with India, maybe a realignment of the fiscal rules, who knows? But, Peter, if you were to give the British government some advice right now, what would you be saying?
Well, I would encourage them to continue with their discussions with India. I think India also has a growing economy with a huge middle class, and I am in favor of engagement. I'm in favor of opening markets, of providing access to business, whether that be in India or in China or in Southeast Asia or indeed in the United States. I think that is good for everybody.
Okay.
But it doesn't seem to be the way the world is going at the moment. The only thing I would say is that the government back in January had the India trip that Rachel Reeves is making is to conduct what they call an economic and financial dialogue. And that economic financial dialogue, actually I think India is coming to the United Kingdom, was held with China back in January. And you can see if you go through the outcome statement, 69 paragraphs with plenty of subsidiary initiatives within those paragraphs to look at ways in which the United Kingdom and China can continue to build a healthy business relationship.
Okay. Peter, thank you. Michael, your final thoughts?
Trade with China, engage with China, speak frankly to them, but keep British interests in mind. The United States is our key ally. One day President Trump will be out of office. One day President Xi will be out of office. And British interests will continue beyond that. So we need to navigate this period. Stay firm, stay strong, do not give the Chinese any hint of weakness or appeasement, and deal with them in a fair but firm manner.
Well, thank you both for your thoughts on this. I know that the conversation has been very popular with people listening at home. Plenty of messages coming in. Peter Burnett, CEO and China-Britain Business Council, thank you so much for giving us your time. And Michael, lovely to see you. Michael Sheridan, former Far East correspondent for the Sunday Times and author, of course, of the brilliant The Red Emperor, Xi Jinping and His New China.
What do you guys think? Do you have anything to add on top of this conversation? Please leave your comment below. We would love to hear from you.
Thank you for making it this far. If you like this video, you might want to share it with a like-minded friend. Thank you, and as always, stay blessed.